So it's really good to be here tonight. It's exciting to ask these questions and to know there are answers as well to these questions. They're not just these vague things out there. There are actual answers that God has for us, and they're answers that change people's lives. So it is brilliant to be here tonight. But I'm going to start with a test of your honesty. How honest are you? How many people here have failed an exam before? Put your hand up if you've failed an exam before. Okay, all right, there we go. Some honest people, and some people who won't admit to it, and maybe some people who haven't. But when there's two big exams in my life that stick that I failed. I may have failed others, but there's two that stick. So one of them was when I was an undergraduate student in Edinburgh, and this subject, company law, it was so boring, it just wouldn't stick in my head, or at least that was my excuse anyway. The reality was I failed, and I had to deal with that. But the second exam that I failed was potentially more problematic because I came down to Hull to learn to be a maths teacher. And at the end of my first year of university, I was doing a diploma in maths. I opened the envelope, and one of the maths papers potentially needed a reset, which is okay, except that the reset was scheduled for the week after my wedding. Now, you don't keep a girl waiting for 5 years and then mess up the honeymoon. It's a bad strategy indeed, and you can ask me later about how that was rectified. But the reality is, I am married, so we got there anyway. But none of us like to fail. That's just a fact. We don't like to fail, do we? Some people here, maybe you never have failed anything. Maybe you have a 100% record so far. Driving test, done. Exams, done. School reports, done. Martial arts gradings, done. I don't know what else you can pass, but maybe you've never failed anything. Others are a bit more used to it, to be honest. Others of us have failed a few things before. But I've got some bad news for everybody here, for you and for me and for everybody in the room. No matter how successful your track record has been so far, you and I are failures. Every single one of us. There is one exam that we're all going to sit, and if we sat it now, we would fail. And this is an exam that God gets to set. I'm going to call it God's goodness exam. One day, every single person who has been given the amazing gift of life by God is going to have to answer some questions to God about how they've used this gift that he has given them. And God's standards match his own character. They match his own goodness. And so therefore, the pass mark in this exam is going to be 100%. Complete goodness required, not one bit of badness is going to be acceptable. Now, let's be honest, in a room like this, right now, there's some of you who couldn't care less about that at the minute. You couldn't care whether you'd pass or fail that exam, let's be honest. Some of you maybe even are a bit offended already that God would mark you as a fail. Or maybe even worse than that, some of you already are thinking, God's got no right to ask me any questions. And then there are some of you who will nod and say, well, yeah, I would fail that exam. I've got some skeletons in my closet that I wouldn't want my best friend to know about, never mind people here tonight. But you know what? Whatever your attitude, it doesn't change the fact that one day we are going to face God, and he is going to want answers from us. So what I want to urgently do now, I want to show you that although we can't and we won't match up to God's goodness, because God is so very good, he has made a way for that exam to be passed. And it is all tied up with our question tonight, why did Jesus live? Why did Jesus live? Here is a really good answer to that question that I'm going to be working with tonight. Jesus lived to perfectly pass God's goodness exam for us. Jesus lived to perfectly pass God's goodness exam on our behalf for us. So there's a part of the Bible on the bit of paper in front of you, and it is one of the eyewitness accounts of the death of Jesus on the cross. Lindsay, I'm going to borrow one from your table. So, thank you. And it's part of the Bible, and it is an eyewitness account of Jesus dying on the cross. And as I read it, I'm going to read it out to you, and you can read along if you want and listen. But I want you to notice the amazing ways that different people responded to Jesus as he was living his last few hours on the cross. And even more amazing than that, I want you to notice how Jesus responded to others during this terrible time. So here we go. I'm going to read it. It's from the book of Luke 23. And this is what it says. As Jesus died on the cross, 2 other men, both criminals, were also led out with him to be executed. When they came to the place called the Skull, they crucified him there, along with the criminals, one on his right and the other on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And they divided up his clothes by casting lots. The people stood watching, and the rulers even sneered at him. They said, "He saved others. Let him save himself if he is God's Messiah, the chosen one." The soldiers also came up and mocked him. They offered him wine vinegar and said, "If you're the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was a notice written above him which read, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him. "Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other criminal rebuked him. "Don't you fear God," he said, "since you are under the same sentence? We are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus answered him, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." Now, that's a pretty amazing part of the Bible. It's a part of the Bible that one of my favorite parts, one of the most incredible parts, that when I read it, I am amazed by what I have read. Incredible things that we're reading about. But you might be thinking, what a strange place to start. I want to answer the question, why did Jesus live? And I start by talking about a place where Jesus is dying. That's very strange, isn't it? But the reality is, when you want to know what somebody's made of, when you want to see just really what's inside somebody, the best place to go is whenever they're really being squashed and squeezed. Like a tube of toothpaste with the lid taken off it. If you squeeze it, you know what's on the inside. It comes out, doesn't it? And when somebody is being squeezed, you get to see what they're really made of. You see, up to this point on the cross, Jesus' whole life has been one of absolute perfection. Now, not the sort of perfection that drives people away. Do you know that holier than thou, I'm better than you type perfection? That sort of Ned Flanders type thing. Not that. This is a perfection that is wonderful, compassionate, loving, attractive. This is a perfection that meant he was constantly surrounded by crowds of people who just wanted to be near Jesus. They just wanted Jesus to help them. You see, up to this point, Jesus would pass God's goodness exam with flying colours. Despite loads of tiredness in his life, hard people, difficult family relationships, constant opposition, so all that bad stuff. But then on the other hand, popularity, people wanting to listen to him all the time, people praising him all the time. You put those two things together, one of them is normally enough to send somebody down a bad path. But both of them, surely they would send Jesus off track. But despite all of those things, Jesus has only done what is right and good all of the time. He has completely and utterly practiced what he preached. He has loved the Lord his God with all his heart and all his soul and all his mind and all his strength. He has loved his neighbour as himself, even when it hurt him to do so. But with nails hammered through his hands and his feet, with a body that has been battered and scarred by the worst of human brutality, what is going to come out of Jesus when he is squeezed in a way that he has never been squeezed before? What is going to come out? Well, if you were paying attention, and if you're noticing some of the incredible bits of that passage that I read out, verse 34 tells us what came out when Jesus was squeezed in this way. "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." It's just amazing. Amazing response. Forgive them. Now just think for a moment in your own life. Be honest. Think how hard it is to forgive anyone, even for the smallest of offences. So I always, for this one in my own heart, I go to where I'm driving and the stupid Audi driver drives right in front of me again, pushes in. I think how angry I get, how hard it is just to forget that. Or if you're in the queue in Herons, or if in the queue in Tesco or whatever, and somebody just walks in front of you, it's a small thing. It's hard to forgive them, isn't it? It's hard to let it go. It's difficult, but you ratchet it up a bit. Are you good at forgiving when somebody insults you in front of other people? Are you good at forgiving that? Can you let it go? Are you good at forgiving when someone hurts your family? You see, Jesus, who lived perfectly, he's being killed with criminals in the most horrific of ways. And yet his prayer at this moment is, Father, forgive them. You have to look what came out of Jesus at his lowest point. And then you've got to look at what didn't come out of Jesus at his lowest point. You see, his clothes are being callously divided up. The rulers who had plotted and manipulated to get him on the cross, they're sneering at him. The soldiers who had already assaulted him brutally are mocking him. And even one of the criminals crucified with him joining in. Jesus didn't respond at all. No arguing, no justifying himself, no bitter words at all. Take another moment just to think about the last time that somebody offended you. Don't think about it too long, because it gets you cross, because we're like that. But think about the last time somebody offended you. Did your thoughts and your words and your actions, it's probably mostly your thoughts. Most of us are quite a controlled people externally. But what were your thoughts like the last time somebody offended you? Did they match up to Jesus' standards when he's on the cross? You see, Jesus' goodness is most clearly seen at this, his lowest point. It's no normal goodness. And this remarkable goodness, it does two remarkable things for the most unexpected character in the story. This criminal on the cross suddenly realizes Jesus' identity. He suddenly realizes Jesus' purpose. We often call this guy the thief on the cross. He may well have been a murderer as well. We're not really sure. He's definitely a criminal, and he's done something serious enough to be put to death. And as this guy's life is bleeding away, the same as Jesus, as he's struggling to breathe, the same as Jesus, he's been watching Jesus. And so he rebukes the other criminal who's been hurling insults at Jesus. He says, we're punished justly. We're getting what we deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong. Now, this isn't just a simple observation. It is an observation, but it's not a simple observation for this dying criminal. It's an incredible explosion of hope into his brokenness and his suffering and his doom. You see, the dying criminal looks at how Jesus is living, even in these last hours, especially because it's his last hours. He sees the love and the care and the kindness and the forgiveness that is coming out of Jesus as he is suffering. And he knows who Jesus is. And he knows why Jesus has come. See, he realizes somehow that God himself is here to rescue sinful people who would put their hope in him. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. The Bible's full of brilliant stuff. We would love you to read the Bible. We want Christians to read the Bible more. We want people who don't know yet to read the Bible more. It's full of brilliant stuff, but there are few sentences that are better than that one. The sentence that criminal said, it's a huge part of why you've probably been invited here tonight, why one of your friends or family have maybe invited you to church even in the past. Jesus is 100% goodness, and the Bible name for that is righteousness. But his 100% goodness has shown this criminal that despite his bad life, and the Bible name for that is sin, and living your own way, in your own terms, by your own rules. But Jesus' goodness has shown this man that despite his badness, despite him falling well short of this 100% standards, and that the 100% good God demands, despite all that, God's goodness exam can be passed because Jesus can pass it for him. The response of the thief on the cross to Jesus is 100% the right response. He counts himself responsible for his own badness. He acknowledges that Jesus is utter goodness, and he realizes that his only hope at this most frightening, threatening, terrible moment of this messed up life is to cry out to Jesus. And King Jesus, he is a king. The sign above the cross was nearly right. King of the Jews. He's actually king of the universe. But King Jesus answers him with this wonderful sentence, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." Why did Jesus live? Luke's Gospel, the book of the Bible we get this account from, gives a really short explanation. It says this: Jesus came to seek and to save the lost. Jesus' 100% goodness when he lived on this earth revealed his identity and his purpose, but it also qualified him to do something incredible for anybody who would put their faith in him. It means that Jesus can offer anyone the chance to pass God's goodness exam, the chance to be saved forever. You see, that very day, as the condemned criminal, as his life bled away, he began a new life with Jesus that would last forever, would last through death, and is lasting even now, a new eternal life that would last forever because Jesus gave it to him. His response to Jesus was exactly the right one. And it'd be wonderful to end there and just assume that everybody else is going to make that same response to Jesus. That would be great. But we know that's not the case. And even in the account, as we read it, that wasn't everybody else's response to Jesus in the account. There were some people in this account who were just totally apathetic about Jesus. They didn't care. They were just watching as Jesus lived his last few hours on this earth. They weren't saying anything. They weren't engaging that much. They were just watching. They were more or less unaffected by the life of Jesus. In a group like this, there's always some watchers. There's always people interested enough to kind of turn up, but not really bothered either way about Jesus, if you're being honest. But what you've got to notice is that the watchers don't end up saved in this account. They fail God's exam. And then there's some in the account who are really offended by Jesus. And some very religious people there, rulers among the Jews. And they weren't standing watching, were they? These were the guys who had conspired to get Jesus on the cross. And even as he is dying, even in those last few hours, they're so angered by him, they're so riled up by his rejection of their kind of good deeds, that they're sneering at Jesus. He saved others. Let him save himself. Again, in a group like this, there's people who, I guess, think they're pretty good. Maybe even very religious. Maybe the idea that you need Jesus to save you actually offends you, makes you angry. But again, notice the moral, religious people in this account, they don't end up saved. They fail God's exam. And then there were some even in the account who were really scathing about Jesus. The soldiers, even one of the criminals, were hurling insults at him. Now, it wasn't that he had offended their religion. It was more, I think, that this pathetic person could somehow have imagined that he could rule over anyone. So not content with brutalizing him, they mock him even while he suffers. And again, in a group like this, maybe some of you are mockers. Maybe the very idea of Jesus and Christianity sounds pretty pathetic to you. But the soldiers don't end up saved in this account. They fail God's exam. See, there's only one person in this account who recognized who Jesus really was. Only one person who was amazed by Jesus. Only one person whose life was filled with hope. Only one person who benefited from Jesus' 100% goodness. And so the question for each of us now, it's a big question. It's a question that really matters. But it's this: how are you going to respond to Jesus? Thank you for listening. And I'll pass back over to Liam for now, Liam. Okay, thank you. Great.